with your memoir that next week you're going to be picking a memoir out to read. Everyone can pick a different memoir. There is a list you can choose from, which I will share with you shortly. But we're going to be talking about identity. And you need to understand the concept of identity for both the memoir that you're writing this week and for the memoir that you're going to begin reading next week. So the memoir that you begin reading next week is part of your final, and the final will be a writing prompt that asks you to write in 30 minutes a response to how you think the identity of your main character changed due to some conflict. So you need to understand what identity means. So we're going to read a really short memoir called Fish Cheeks. Have I read Fish Cheeks ever with you guys? That you remember? We're going to talk about the identity of the author of Fish Cheeks, the narrator. And so you want to think about, as we read it, what are the author's or the narrator's beliefs, actions, thoughts, words, interests, relationships, and roles. So think about that as we read Fish Cheeks, and then we'll fill in the first head with her identity from Fish Cheeks. Okay, so this is by Amy Tan, who wrote The Joy Luck Club. It says, I fell in love with the minister's son the winter I turned 14. He was not Chinese, but as white as Mary in the manger. For Christmas, I prayed for this blonde-haired boy, Robert, and a slim, new American nose. When I found out that my parents had invited the minister's family over for Christmas Eve dinner, I cried. What would Robert think of our shabby Chinese Christmas? What would he think of our noisy Chinese relatives who lacked proper American manners? What terrible disappointment would he feel upon seeing not a roasted turkey and sweet potatoes, but Chinese food? On Christmas Eve, I saw that my mother had outdone herself in creating a strange menu. She was pulling black veins out of the backs of fleshy prawns. The kitchen was littered with appalling mounds of raw food. A slimy rock cod with bulging eyes that pleaded not to be thrown into a pan of hot oil. Tofu, which looked like stacked wedges of rubbery white sponges. A bowl soaking dried fungus back to life. A plate of squid, their backs crisscrossed with knife markings so they resembled bicycle tires. And then they arrived. The minister's family and all my relatives in a clamor of doorbells and rumpled Christmas packages. Robert grunted hello, and I pretended he was not worthy of existence. Dinner threw me deeper into despair. My relatives licked the ends of their chopsticks and reached across the table, dipping them into the dozen or so plates of food. Robert and his family waited patiently for platters to be passed to them. My relatives murmured with pleasure when my mother brought out the whole steamed fish. Robert grimaced. Then my father poked his chopsticks just below the fish eye and plucked out the soft meat. Amy, your favorite, he said, offering me the tender fish cheek. I wanted to disappear. At the end of the meal, my father leaned back and belched loudly, thanking my mother for her fine cooking. It's a polite Chinese custom to show you are satisfied, explained my father to our astonished guests. Robert was looking down at his plate with a reddened face. The minister managed to muster a quiet burp. I was stunned into silence for the rest of the night. After everyone had gone, my mother said to me, "You want to be the same as American girls on the outside." She handed me an early gift. It was a miniskirt in beige tweed. But inside, you must always be Chinese. You must be proud you are different. Your only shame is to have shame. And even though I didn't agree with her then, I knew that she understood how much I had suffered during the evening's dinner. It wasn't until many years later, long after I'd gotten over my crush on Robert, that I was fully able to appreciate her lesson and the true purpose behind our particular menu. For Christmas Eve that year, she had chosen all my favorite foods. So, what do you think indicates the author's identity, Amy's identity? So what are her beliefs? What does she believe? Yes, Ash?
She likes some kind of Christian or just religious. She says she prayed.
Yeah, she did say she prayed. Obviously, they're having over the minister's family, so they are fairly religious. So they obviously have some religious beliefs. What do you think? What does she believe about Americans? What does she think about America? Yeah.
The only way that they'll like you is if you're the same personality.
Yeah. That the only way that they will be liked, or that she will be liked, is if she looks like she's American. Because what does she wish for? A slim American nose. And her mother buys her an early gift, which is probably an American fashion at the time, with some kind of mini skirt that I'm sure was not a Chinese fashion. So she wants to be American, and she even refers to Robert as white as Mary in the manger. So she wants to look like that as well, a blonde-haired boy. So her beliefs. What about her actions? What does she do? How does she behave throughout this memoir?
Shy.
Yeah, she acts shy. What does she do when Robert says hello? Yeah, she pretends like he's not worthy of her, which is kind of maybe just a teenager thing, you know, not worthy of her attention. Okay, her thoughts. What is she thinking about? Yeah.
That they're going to think her family's like rude because they don't have American manners.
Yeah, that they're going to be judged because they don't have American manners. And in China, the custom is to everybody be reaching for the food at once and kind of shoving your chopsticks or maybe even your forks all onto the same plate, even after you've licked it, like going back for more, which Americans wouldn't really do. What is most embarrassing to her? Yeah, when her dad burps, she's mortified. And she's also embarrassed that her dad offers her the fish cheek, which is apparently the most tender part of fish. I wouldn't personally know, but that's like a delicacy, and he's offering it to her because that's her favorite food. But she's mortified because she thinks Robert is going to think it's gross. Okay, so what does her mother say to her? Her relationship with her mother. What does her mother, try to say after everyone leaves? Julianne?
Like that even though she wants to act like an American on the outside, that she needs to keep her Chinese heritage and roots inside.
Right. So I actually think it's a really powerful line that her mother says, "Your only shame is to have shame. The only thing you should be embarrassed about is the fact that you're embarrassed to be Chinese." And so I think that's a really powerful line, actually. And she admits that now she's writing this as an adult now, back reflecting on this incident that happened when she was a teenager. And now she's able to say that even though I didn't agree with her then, I knew she understood how I was suffering as a teenager who wasn't feeling that confident in who she was. But now she realizes that actually her mother went out of her way to make Amy actually feel good that night by preparing all of her favorite foods, and then it still didn't work. Amy was still, embarrassed and mortified. So those are things that make up an identity. So that's some examples from this memoir. So you guys are going to be picking out a memoir to read. And there's a list of memoirs on Destiny that some of the other English 11 teachers and I have put together. And you're going to need this book by next week, Tuesday. And so this is our final unit. So you guys have some time to read it. How many weeks of school are left? 4 or 5? 4-ish? So you have about a month to read it. And then as as you read it, we'll also be going through some more excerpts from other memoirs, maybe even from the one that you picked to read, but to point out certain things that you should be looking for in the memoir as you read it. And then at the end of the 4 weeks, you guys will take a test where you will write to a prompt about the identity of your narrator and how the conflict in the memoir affects your narrator's identity. So you want to be able to, kind of keep track as you're reading of different aspects of your narrator's identity within your memoir that you're reading. You also, for tomorrow, need to be thinking about how, in the memoir that you're writing, that you're turning in this week, how you are conveying these aspects of your own identity in the memoir that you're writing. So how are you making it clear what your beliefs are, what your thoughts are, what your actions are, what your role is in your family or in your friend group or whatever's appropriate for the memoir that you're writing, your relationships. You want to make sure that those aspects are coming through in your memoir too. So you want to look over what you've written so far and see if there's anywhere where you can add some indication of, why you are the way you are, why the conflict happened that you're writing about, and how that relates to your identity, your beliefs, your actions, your roles, your relationships, okay? So when you go, you'll have time today and tomorrow. Obviously, you'll be getting on the computers to type your own memoirs. So I want you to go to this resource list in Destiny and find 4 or 5 titles that you're interested in reading that sound interesting to you. So maybe read a little bio from each one. They vary in length. So if you're concerned and don't feel like you're a fast reader, you can try to pick one that's not as long. And they vary in topic. So some are written from a soldier's point of view, which I think happens to appeal to many boys. Some are, from girls, from boys, from adults, from children. Long, short, from different areas. Some are from the United States, from throughout Europe, from during World War II, if you're interested in World War II. They did just add a memoir last year that I read called A Woman in Berlin, which is, it was a woman's actual diary that she kept during World War II when she was living in Berlin. And it's about how she was a single woman, and she kind of had to befriend some of the Nazi soldiers, because if she did, then they would bring her food, and she would share it with other people who lived in her apartment building. And some of the soldiers, both Russian and German, would be coming around drunk and looking to rape women, and by kind of befriending them and becoming their girlfriend, she felt like she was protecting some of the younger girls who lived in her building from being raped. So, I think that's a really good one. There's another one that I think is really, really amazing. I couldn't put the book down when I read it. Oh, already done. Anyway, you guys can look at them tomorrow.